Masechet Nazir Daf Kaf Tet. This daf has a beautiful structure. We're going to bring a machloket and then 7 challenges to one side of the machloket. And after that, we're going to try to line up this machloket Amoraim with machloket Tanaim and discuss that machloket Tanaim a little further. All right, the topic is what we already introduced in the Mishnah, which is that a father has a right to impose a Nazirut vow on his son. Right? He could say, my son, you are going to be a Nazir. Of course, the son or one of the relatives can object, and then he won't be a Nazir. The Gemara but a mother cannot do so for her son, and also neither can do so for a daughter. A woman, of course, can be Nazirot, but a daughter, it cannot be imposed upon. So we're going to wonder, what is the reason for this? Ish in aval isha la. My ta'ama. How come a father can impose a nizirut on his son, but a mother cannot? 2 opinions. Rabbi Yochanan amar halacha hi ben nazir. Rabbi Yochanan says it's a halacha. It's simply a tradition. This is now the second time Rabbi Yochanan said this. We already saw this in a previous sugya. Rabbi Yochanan says it's a tradition. It's part of the oral law. Whereas Rabbi Yosef be Rabbi Hanina Amar Resh Lakish Kedei lechanecho b'misvot. It's important to remember this tradent. It's Rabbi Yosef be Rabbi Hanina. He said this in the name of Resh Lakish, the colleague of Rabbi Yochanan, and says, no, the reason why a father can impose Nazirut on his son is not a Deoraita law. It's not an oral law from Moshe that would have the authority, a similar authority as a Deoraita law. Rather, it's a Drabanan in order that a father should teach his son mitzvot. By being a Nazir, the son will learn how to keep away from prohibitions, how to be careful, and this could be good training, good discipline for the son. So this, if a father thinks that being a Nazir is good for him, then that's why a father can impose it on his minor son. Okay, now that we have these 2 opinions, let's try to figure out. Afilu isha nameh. This is going to be the first of 7 questions that we're going to ask about Resh Lakish, which is, if you say it's in order to educate the child, then how come a mother cannot make her son a Nazir? We understand according to the Rabbi Yochanan. According to Rabbi Yochanan, since this is an oral tradition, that's it. The oral tradition is predefined. There's no point in asking why. That's just the way it is. The oral tradition says a father can do this and not a mother. But according to Resh Lakish, who gives a rational reason why the rabbis decided to do this, well, just like a father has to teach a son, doesn't a mother also have an obligation to teach her son? And the answer is, Sabar ish chayav lechanech beno b'misvot, ve'en ha'isha chayavet lechanech et bena. So no, only a father has a commandment to teach his son. He is absolutely commanded to teach his son various things, whereas a woman, of course, a mother is obviously doing a lot of important things and can also teach her son, but she is not obligated as a mitzvah to teach her son in the area of Torah and discipline. And so therefore, the rabbis did not give her, the mother, the authority to make her minor son a Nazir, only gave that to the father. Incidentally, in the upcoming answers for Resh Lakish, we're going to see a lot of rulings that we don't follow for halacha. And this is, in fact, one of them. There's a machloket about whether a mother is obligated to educating her son. Okay. Bishlamal Rabbi Yochanan, Damar halacha hi ben Nazir, ametu lahachi beno in bitola. Second question, we understand according to Rabbi Yochanan, since it's simply an oral tradition from Sinai, so that the father can make his minor son a Nazir. I'm saying minor. We're going to see the exact age in the second half of this stuff. So that's the reason why it only applies to a son, but not a daughter. But according to Resh Lakish, it should be a daughter also. Don't you have to teach a daughter? Don't you have to train her in doing mitzvot, in self-discipline? So how come a father cannot make his daughter a Nazira? And the answer is Kasavar beno chayav lechanecho, bito eno chayav lechanecha. Reish Lakish thinks that a father has to teach his son. He has to teach his son Torah and various things, but he is not obligated to teach his daughter. All right, so therefore, since there's no obligation, obviously he's going to teach his daughter. You have to teach your daughter mitzvot that she's going to have to know how to do. But in this more expanded definition of education, is not obligated, and therefore the rabbis did not create a possibility of nizirut, a derabanan nizirut, just for education for a daughter. All right, Bishlama, third question. Rabbi Yochanan damar halacha ben Nazir hachi ben zirut in ben darim la el shakish afilu nedarim nameh. Now, this halacha we just said is only that a father can impose a nizirut obligation on his minor son. So it makes sense if it's an oral tradition, then that's why it works for a nizirut, but not other vows. A father cannot make a different kind of vow. I impose a vow on my minor son that he should not eat sugar. No, you can't do that. And what's the difference? Well, that's a halacha, oral tradition, so there's no, that's what it says, so there's no point in asking questions about it. But according to Reish Lakish, if it's for education, so maybe a father says, oh, I need to educate my son, and he's hanging out with the wrong crowd of friends, so I make a neder. You can't go to that guy's house. He's a bad influence, right? Or whatever it is. So it should, or you have to want to make sure that you take a neder. You're going to study a Mishnah every day. So according to Reish Lakish, what's the difference? If it's for chinuch, a father should be able to impose midrabanan, a vow, another kind of vow, not only nizirut. And the answer is, you're right, a father can do that according to Reish Lakish. Lami bayakamat. And the Mishnah didn't mention it. Mishnah only mentioned nizirut because it's obvious that other nedarim. Lami bayamidarim delet lenivul, ela afilu ben zirut, deit lenivul, afilu hachi, chayav lechanecha. Not only regarding neder, where there is no degradation. See, for nizirut, person's going to grow his hair long and going to look all disheveled, and so there is degradation. And so I might think that a father can impose it on the son anyway. So surely I don't even need to say that when there's no degradation, like if a father says, I want to make sure you don't hang out with that friend who's a hoodlum. I want to make sure that you don't do something dangerous, or that you study Mishnah every day. So this is no degradation in that, and so certainly that father can do that. And so all the more so to make him a Nazir. So that's for sure he can. The chidush is that the father can even make the son a Nazir, in which there is degradation, because that is part of his education. All right, good. So we've solved that. Fourth question. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan. Damar halacha hi ben Nazir. Hanu tekatani micha o shemichuhu kerovav. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that says it's simply an oral tradition. So part of the oral tradition built into it is that he himself, the boy, or another relative can object and say, no, we don't like that you're making this boy a Nazir, and so we stop it. And then they can shave him, and he's not a Nazir anymore. All right, that's just part of the law. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina, Amar Reish Lakish, Kol kimi nehon kerobim da'amrim le la tigmere misvot. But according to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina, in the name of Reish Lakish, who said, it's a derabanan that made it for rational reasons, for education. So do the other relatives, some uncle or whatever, have the right, have the power to go and say, no, you should not teach your son mitzvot? If the father thinks this is a proper education for my son, what does anybody else have a right? If a father says, I'm going to send my kid to this school, to this yeshiva, so other relative has a right to say, no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't train him in mitzvot. The father says, I'm going to teach my son how to put on tefillin. So another person, another relative should say, no, you can't do that. What right would they have? So according to the Reish Lakish, why does a relative have a right to object? And the answer is kasavar kol chinuch de la chashiv la nichale. If you have a type of education, a manner of education that is not important because it's not an obligation like tefillin or like studying Torah. This is something that's an optional thing, and it's not considered important, and therefore it's not going to be good, amenable for the kid to be educated in that way. And therefore, the son says, "What is this? My father's making me be a Nazir, right? None of my friends are doing this. It's not obligated according to the Torah, right? This is not the best way." Or some uncle or cousin can come and say, why are you making your son a Nazir, making him go through all this trouble? This is not, he doesn't need this. Instead, teach him Perashat HaShavua, teach him some Mishnah, right? Teach him, go do a chesed trip with the kid. Teach him things in that way. That's a more important way. So therefore, while some kids might benefit from being a Nazir, and if the father and all the relatives and the son says, yeah, you're right, it's a good idea, I'm going to be a Nazir, fine, you can do it. But since it's an optional and not generally necessary, important for kids' education, that's why the rabbis gave this out, that a relative or the kid himself can object. All right, fifth challenge. Bishlama l'Rabbi Yochanan damar halachahi ben Nazir mishum hachi megalech ve'aved hakafa. At the end of a Nazirut, the Nazir has to shave his head entirely. Now, generally, it's prohibited for a man to shave his sideburns and temples, and by shaving all his entire head, that's also shaving the corners of his head. And now, this is generally prohibited for a person to just go and shave his sideburns. However, a Nazir, if he's really a Nazir, is an exception, and the Torah says you have to shave your head. So therefore, it's permitted. Torah permits shaving head of a Nazir. But that's only if a person is actually a Nazir mideoraita. So we understand, according to Rabbi Yochanan, this is the oral law. Yes, this boy is a Nazir at a deoraita level. It doesn't have to be written in the Torah to be a deoraita level obligation. It's part of the oral tradition, so it has the same authority. However, according to Resh Lakish, who say the rabbis came up with this Nizirut Derabanan. So, all right, so now this boy, when he comes to the end of the Nizirut, he's going to shave his head, and he's going to violate a Deoraita law. What right do the rabbis have to create a Nizirut that's going to end up violating a Deoraita law? It's all part of the question. According to Shakish, to teach him mitzvot, you're going to make him violate a biblical commandment and round out his head. Kasaba, round out. They mean because one of the styles of idol worshippers was to make a haircut where it was round, like kind of like monks. You might see today, kind of looks like a kippah, but made out of hair, so that there's a straight line above the person's ears all the way to the back. So you're going to violate a Doraita law in order to educate the kid? That doesn't make sense. And the answer is, Kasavar hakafat kol harosh midrabanan, v'chinuch midrabanan, v'ateh chinuch drabanan, v'dacheh hakafa drabanan. Resh Lakish thinks that shaving one's entire head is prohibited, but only midrabanan. The Oraita law is if one shaves and makes a circle haircut, like the priests do. If one only shaves the sideburns and the temples and makes that kind of haircut, that's a prohibited Oraita. But if you're not making that kind of haircut, and you're shaving your entire head to be totally bald, which is what a Nazir has to do, that's only prohibited midrabanan. And therefore, since educating a child is drabanan in the first place, and the rabbis are the ones that said, don't shave your entire head, so the rabbis can override the prohibition of shaving an entire head with a commandment to be a Nazir for a child for the sake of education. And so, yeah, there you go. It is okay. All right. Bishlama. Sixth question. L'Rabbi Yochanan damar halacha hi ben Nazir ahachi megaleach maite korban. We understand according to the Yochanan, since it's an oral tradition, so it's like a deoraita. So when this boy finishes the Nazirut, he's going to have to bring his 3 korbanot. Now, shilamim and olah, anyone can bring any time as a voluntary offering. But the thing is, what about the korban hatat, right? We know that you can only bring a korban hatat if you're obligated to. If one is not obligated to bring korban hatat and he consecrates it and brings it, the consecration is not a consecration because there's no obligation for korban hatat. You're going to bring it to the Bet HaMikdash and you violate bringing chulin, a secular, non-sacred animal, into the temple courtyard and slaughtering it and eating it. This is a prohibition. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, that's fine. He's a real Nazir. Deoraita Nazir, so he has to bring the korban. According to the Shakish, this is only the Rabbanan Nazirut. Well, fine, you want to not drink wine, okay, you're not violating anything, but now you're going to bring a korban hatat that on deoraita level is not a chatat, it's just a regular animal. You're bringing it into the azara, slaughtering it. Now you're violating a deoraita, aren't you? And the answer is kasavar cholin bazara lav deoraita. No, Resh Lakish thinks that bringing a non-sacred animal into the Bet HaMikdash, slaughtering it, is only asur midrabanan, and therefore the rabbis can override their own drabanan with a drabanan for the sake of education. All right, 7th and final question. Bishlamar Rabbi Yochanan Damar halachahi benazir ahachi ki mitame maite korban siporin v'achel kohen milika. According to Rabbi Yochanan, if a boy whose father made him a nazir becomes tameh in the middle, just like any nazir, they would have to bring 2 birds for olah and hatat. Now, so according to Rabbi Yochanan, we understand this person is going to bring a korban of birds, and the kohen, well, usually when we eat birds like we do today, we do shehita with a little knife in the normal way. However, in the Bet HaMikdash, whenever they killed a bird, they didn't slaughter it with shehita and a knife, but rather, as we have the picture here, let's see this fancy technique. The Kohen would have a long thumbnail and would hold the bird, and he would pinch the bird in the back of its neck, and cut the bird's neck from the back and sever its windpipe from this way. And so this is called Milika. Now in the Bet HaMikdash, this is the way you have to kill a bird, and the bird is kosher. The Kohanim can eat the bird when done in this way. However, if now outside the Bet HaMikdash, someone would slaughter a bird in this way, doing milika, it would be called nevela, right? It would be not kosher, not slaughtered properly. So you see that if it's a real korban, then you can bring it this way. That's all fine. But if you're not really a nazir and you're going to go and slaughter a bird this way, then this is a problem. Now the Kohanim who are eating this bird are eating nevela because it's not really needed to bring this korban. So what are you going to do with that? For Resh Lakish, it's fine because he is a nazir on the doraita level. And the answer is Kasabar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda de'en shechita la'of min haTorah v'chulin ba'azara lav de'oraita. Oh, it must be that Resh Lakish follows the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the requirement for shechita with a knife at the front of the neck for a bird is not deoraita. It's only the Rabbanan, which is quite an amazing chidush, because we require shechita, but according to him, look, fish don't need shechita, even though the Dead Sea sect did think that fish require shechita. You have to drain the blood, and you can't have the blood, you have to salt it and all that. But the rabbis didn't think so. They say they say fish do not require shechita. And according to this, on the deoraita level, even birds would not require shechita. They'd be like fish. Only the Rabbanan, they said, well, fish are kind of like animals, so we should require it. Therefore, in the Bet HaMikdash, if they do milika for a korban, that's not really a korban, so, all right, midrabanan, it's nevela, but only midrabanan, and therefore the rabbis can override that for the sake of education. And chulin also in the azara, as we said in the previous answer, is also not deoraita. And although there's two drabanans here, okay, the rabbis can override also two drabanans for the sake of education. Okay, it's kind of curious. For the sake of educating the kid, we're going to violate all these drabanans. I don't know. You might be afraid he's going to learn the wrong drabanan laws. But okay, I guess you explain it to the kid. And therefore, this is the end of the 7 challenges to Resh Lakish. So we successfully answered all of the challenges. All right, now question. We attributed here to the Biyoseh b'Rabbi Yehuda that he says that Shehita and Chulin Shehita for a bird and having Chulin Ba'azara is not the Oraita. Now we're going to question, does he really think that? We're going to challenge it from a long Baraita. V'sabar Rabbi Yoseh hachi, Rabbi Yoseh, we're talking about this, Rabbi Yoseh, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. Does he really think so? V'atanya, Rabbi Yoseh b'Rabbi Yehuda omer. מניין לחטאת העוף שהיא באה על הספק שאינה נאכלת תלמוד לומר והזב את זובו לזכר ולנקבה. Baraita teaches in the name of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, how do you know that a bird that's brought for a hatat, and some sins you have to bring a hatat from a bird, and if you're not sure if you did the sin or not, then it's not eaten. How do you know that? Because it says, "V'azab etzavo lazachar v'lanekeba." Makish is nekeba lazachar. Since regarding a zav, it says a male and female, we're going to compare the two laws. Ma zachar mevi korban alavadai, af nekeba mevi korban alavadai. First of all, when a man sins by mistake, he's going to bring a korban. When he knows that he surely did. And so too, a woman also has to bring korban. You don't really need a pasuk for this, but we know men and women are both chayavim to bring a korban if they make sins that require, inadvertently, that require such a thing. Now, Uma Zachar mebi ala safek, av nekeva mebi ala safek. And we also know that just like a man has, if he's not sure if he ate chelib or not, he has to bring, in that case, not a korban hatat. Hatat is if you're sure, but asham talui. If I did it, just in case, then he would bring that. So to women also bring asham talui. Now, Uma Zachar mimin shehu mebi ala vadai, mebi al hasafek, af nekeva mimin shehu mebi ala vadai, mebi al hasafek. And a man who sins for sure brings the same type of animal that he would bring as an asham. The chatat and asham are both different types of sheep, but they're both sheep. So too af nekeba. Now, when we say nekeba women can bring different types of animals depending on what the case is. When we say nekeba, we mean something that is particular to a woman, meaning childbirth, a yoledet. Although it's not a sin, but for whatever reason, a yoledet has to bring a bird as a hatat. Now, that's if she definitely gave birth. Now, what's the case of a yoledet that she's not sure if she gave birth or not? The answer is that a yoledet has to bring a korban, not only if she gave birth full term, but even if she had a stillbirth after 40 days of pregnancy, that's also considered a child and still has to bring the korban. However, before 40 days, then it's not even considered a child yet. The Talmud says it's maya be'alma. It's not developed. So therefore, if she's not sure if it's exactly before or after 40 days, she sees something, but it's not formed, and so she's not sure what it is, if she is a yoledet or not. In that case, if she's not sure, but it may be, then she can't bring korban chatat, because korban chatat is only if you are sure that you made a sin or sure that you're a yoledet. But if unsure, then you bring a korban asham. Asham now would also be a bird. And so that's what we're learning here. Just like for a male, he brings the same type of animal as a chatat and as an asham. So to an nekeva, a woman for a yoledet, will bring the same type, a bird, whether she's sure or she's not sure if she is a yoledet. Okay, so that's the further comparison. Final comparison between male and female, and that will answer the question that we started with about eating the asham. Since now we're comparing them, we're on a roll. Let's compare them further. And just like if a male has to bring korban asham, the kohanim eat it, right? Even though we're not sure if the person sinned or not. That's the whole point of an asham talui. You bring it, and it's a valid korban, and the kohanim eat part of it as an asham. So too, we should learn nekeva, because the pasuk says zachar and nekeva, compare them. So if a yoledet has to bring a bird for korban asham, so the kohanim should have to bring it, should be able to eat it. Marta lo, but then in the Braita, the same Braita rejects the final comparison. The other comparisons are correct, but even though you might have thought that, the final comparison is not correct, because you can't compare them with a zachar, a male who sins and or not sure if he sinned. He brings an animal, a sheep. And a sheep, if you don't need to bring it, you only would violate one thing, which is bringing chulin la'azara. You see, Shehita is the same, no matter whether it's a korban or not a korban. So this animal, you did Shehita, it's a kosher Shehita, and therefore it's not nebela, it's a kosher animal. So there's only one chidush regarding the zachar, that even though we're not sure if he sinned or not, and so therefore we might consider it chulin, bringing chulin, a non-sacred animal, into the azara. Nevertheless, that's okay. The kohanim are allowed to eat it. But that's not necessarily true for the female offering of a yoledet, which is a bird, and therefore would have two prohibitions. Maishne surim, which two prohibitions? Lav isur nevela, Chulin ba'azara. One of them is the same as the sheep. Chulin ba'azara, it's non-sacred, you're bringing it in. But the other one is, that's a nevela, because the kohen did milika and not shehita. Therefore, if you don't need to bring it, it's a nevela. And since she's not sure if she needs to bring it or not, so therefore the conclusion is that if a yoledet brings a bird offering as an asham, the kohanim cannot eat it. She has to bring it, but we're not sure. We don't want to violate two deoraita laws. What's the point of this whole thing? That this is a challenge to what we said before, that we had some tradition that Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, thought that these two prohibitions are dirabanan, and Resh Lakish relied on that to answer Resh Lakish's question. But according to this baraita, it looks like both of these prohibitions are deoraita, and only because it's deoraita, that's why it outweighs a male who only has one of the prohibitions. And so we answer it. Matkif la Rav Acha bered Rav Ika. Rav Acha is going to challenge this very assumption, and by challenging the question, answering it. Maybe these two prohibitions are considered like a deoraita. The reason why this baraita is saying, no, the nekeva, she has two isurim, really means that the rabbanan, but a kohen would not be able to eat the meat of a bird, asham, because it looks like it's two prohibitions, even though it's only the rabbanan. This is two coming together, so it seems more, and it is more stringent, and therefore the point is that you cannot compare the zachar to nekeva. Nekeva has two, even though you're right, it's the rabbanan, but that still puts it on a higher level, which to the zachar, which did not have that extra the rabbanan, and therefore the baraita is saying you can't necessarily compare them. All right, so we answered the question for Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, and by doing that, we resolved all the 7 questions against Resh Lakish. All right, now that we have Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish, we're going to try to say maybe they are parallel, these Amoraim are parallel to a machloket between two Tanaim. Le'ma ketana'eh. Ad matay madir et beno ben Nazir, עד שיביא שתי שערות דברי רבי. רבי יוסף ורבי יהודה אומר, עד שיגיע לעונת נדרים. Okay. Until what point can a father make a vow on behalf of his son that his son will be a Nazir? Right? What's the cutoff age? If the kid's an adult, then the father has no right to make the son a Nazir. We've never heard of such a thing. So what age would it be? What is the cutoff point? According to the B, that's a Biudah Nasi, until the child has 2 hairs, 2 pubic hairs. That's the general age for bar mitzvah. We say 13, but in truth, it's at least 13. It's 13 and also 2 hairs. Nowadays, we just assume when a kid's 13, so then that's good enough. But really, and for this law, it would be 13 and 2 hairs. This is going to make a difference in the story that we're about to see. Okay, for now, we'll just say, call that 13. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, until he gets to the age of vows, meaning the age when the child himself can make a vow. That's around the age of 12. 12, you ask the child, do you know what a vow is? Do you know how serious it is? And the kid already at 12 can understand what that is, and therefore can make his own vows, and those will be binding vows. So once the son can make a vow, then the father can no longer make a Nazirut vow upon the child. So therefore the cutoff is 12, right? Under 12, everyone agrees the father can make the kid a Nazir, but between 12 and 13, according to Rabbi, the father still can until the kid's 13, but Rabbi Yosef says no, he's not. He can make it, if he wants to be a Nazir, he can make himself a Nazir. The father cannot do it. All right, that would mean, according to the B, that there is 1 year between 12 and 13 where either the son or the father could declare him a Nazir, right? Both of them would work. All right, that's also going to be important for a story coming up. So now let's see how we can line them up. My love Tanaehi, the Rabbi Sabad halachahi ben Nazir, v'afagav dehigia lonat nedarim, madir le v'azir le'ad demaite shete sa'adot. Let's say that Rabbi follows Rabbi Yochanan, who says this is an oral tradition. And there being an oral tradition, it can be anomalous. And even though the kid reached an age where the kid himself can make a vow and can make himself a Nazir, and so you'd think that, well, once the son can do it himself, a father shouldn't be able to do it. It's an oral tradition, and therefore the oral tradition is, 13 is the cutoff, even though 12 would make more sense. So that would fit together. Rabbi Yosef says this is a D'Rabbanan law that's for education, and therefore it's going to make sense. And Rabbi is only going to do something if it has a good rationale. So until a kid is 12, then the father can do it in order to teach the kid about self-discipline and mitzvot. But once the kid is 12 and now is out of the supervision of the father, not totally out of the supervision, but at least in terms of being responsible for their own obligations, for their own vows. So now the son left the supervision of the father regarding vows, and the father should not be allowed anymore to impose a nizirut on his son. All right, so we line them up. Now, lining them up has some logic, but we'd rather not lock in each of these Moraim according to only one Tana, says that Rabbi Yochanan has to only agree with Rabbi. We'd rather that they can explain themselves according to both. So we answer a couple of different possibilities. Amre la dekula alma halacha hi benazir v'acha b'muflah hasamuch leish kamipalge. No, rather everyone agrees that with Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan can explain both of them. And this is an oral tradition. And here, what they're arguing about is a mufla. Mufla means someone knowledgeable that is near being an adult, meaning someone between 11 and 12. Between 12 and 13, right near, somewhat shy of being 13, and who makes a vow. And what is the status of that kid? Rabbi savar muflas muchleish d'Rabbanan, v'atya deoraita tachya d'Rabbanan. If a kid at that age, right before 13, makes a vow, that vow, according to the B, is only valid on the D'Rabbanan level. And therefore, the Deoraita, because according to the Rabbi Yochanan, this oral tradition has the validity of a Deoraita, so the father's imposition of a vow was going to override the son's own power to make a vow. And that's why the father's sticks, right? Because the whole thing before 13 is only D'Rabbanan for the son. Whereas Rabbi Yosef thinks that a kid up to between 12 and 13 can make their own vows on the deoraita level. And therefore, this oral tradition, right, which is a truest deoraita level, but a deoraita would not have the power to override another deoraita. And so, therefore, according to Rabbi Yosef, the father can only impose a vow up till 12, when a son cannot make his own vows. But once it reaches 12, the son is like an adult, full deoraita power for the purpose of vows. So that's how Rabbi Yochanan can explain himself according to everybody. Or another answer, we're all going to follow this Shakish, and it's all D'Rabbanan. This whole law of a father making his son a Nazir is only for education. And everybody's going to assume also that the status of a vow for a 12 to 13-year-old is only D'Rabbanan. Rabbi Sabar ateh chinuch D'Rabbanan v'dache mufla samuch leish D'Rabbanan. Rabbi, who says a father can make a vow during that period, will say, well, it's true, the son's ability to make a vow is only D'Rabbanan, and now Rabbi thinks that the obligation to educate the child is also D'Rabbanan, and D'Rabbanan can come and override the other D'Rabbanan, so that's why a father can impose. Whereas Rabbi Yosef said, no, it should be only until 12, because he thinks that the D'Rabbanan responsibility of education is D'Rabbanan and will not override. There's already a D'Rabbanan there that a child, someone who is near almost an adult, right? He's already training himself, and he can be responsible for vows, even though they're only obligated on him D'Rabbanan. But a second D'Rabbanan should not come and override the D'Rabbanan that is already there, and that's how both Resh Lakish can explain his own opinion according to both Tanaim. Okay, so in the end we say the Machloket Amoraim of here is not parallel to the one of Tanaim. But now that we mentioned this Machloket Tanaim, let's see if those two Tanaim, Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, match up with another controversy of two other Tanaim. All right, so let's see. So remember, we're talking about Rabbi who says that a father can, the cutoff point is 13. A father can impose a Nizirut on his son until 13. And Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, said no, only until 12. So let's see if they match up with the two opinions in the following story. Detanya. Lema hanetane detanya maaseh Rabbi Hanina. Aviv ben Nazir v'hebi'o lifnei Rabban Gamliel. One time, the father of Rabbi Hanina made a vow imposed on his son, Rabbi Hanina, that Rabbi Hanina will be a Nazir. The father said so. And then v'hebi'o, the father brings the son to Rabban Gamliel to figure out what to do, right? Is this valid? Is he old enough? Young enough that the father can do this, or is he past the cutoff age? He was right around that time. So Rabban Gamliel began or wanted to examine the kid to see if he had two hairs, to see if he's obligated. If the kid already has two hairs, then surely it's past the cutoff point. Right? So this is following the opinion of Rabbi. That once he's 13 with two hairs, then the father can no longer impose it. Whereas if he doesn't have two hairs yet, then the father can impose it. So Rabban Gamliel is about to do this examination, which, as you can imagine, may be embarrassing for this kid. Now, Rabbi Yosef Omer, Rabbi Yosef says, no, he wasn't checking for two hairs. That's incorrect. What the story goes, Rabban Gamliel was checking to see if the kid reached the age at which he can make his own vows, which is around 12. But it's not exactly 12. You also have to interview the kid. Do you know what a vow is? Do you know the consequences of a vow? To see if he reached that age, around 12, where he can make a neder. So you see that Rabbi Yosef would fit with Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, who says that Gamliel wants to know, did he reach 12 plus, and then the father no longer has the obligation, or not yet, in which the father can impose the Nezirut. All right. Either way, whatever the examination was about to be, Amar Lo, the kid, Rabbi Chanina says, Rabbi, al tista'ed lebodkeni, im katan ani, ehye bishbil abba, im gadol ani, ehye bishbil atzmi. And Rabbi Chanina said, he was only a kid, wasn't rabbi yet. He said to Rabban Gamliel, says, Rabbi, don't bother examining me. It's okay, right? You don't have to go through with it. I'll be a Nazir anyway. If I am a child, minor, then I'll be a Nazir because my father made the vow. And if I'm an adult, then I'll do it on my own. I'll obligate myself as a vow, which I have a right to do. And so, therefore, it doesn't matter whether I passed that point or not, whatever it is, 13 or 12. עמד רבן גמליאל שקוע על ראשו אמר מובטח אני בזה שמורה הלכה בישראל. אמרו לא היו ימים מועטים עד שהורה הוראה בישראל. רבן גמליאל kissed him on his head and says, I am sure that this child will be teaching laws in Israel very soon. And they say, sure enough, it was only a short time later, a few years, Rabbi Chanina already arose to the status of being able to teach halachot. And you see that his great piety already from his young age. That's the end of the story. So we just saw within the story there are two versions of it, the first version and the Rabbi Yosef's version. And in the first version, which is unnamed here, that matches with Rabbi, who says he was checking for 2 hairs. So that's Rabbi, who says that a father's vow only works if there's less than 2 hairs, but not if there's more than 2 hairs. That's the cutoff point. So that's what he was checking for. That fits. And Rabbi Yosef here may actually very well be Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, who said, no, it's at 12 years old. He was checking to see if he had the competence of that 12-year-old who can make vows on his own or not. And so this does match up, and we don't reject it, right? There's the two opinions here in this, the two versions of the story within this Baraita, in fact, match up with Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda's argument, as we said before. All right, so that's the conclusion there, and that's okay that matches up because it's probably even the same exact people. Now we're just going to challenge the reading because they all agree that Rabbi Hanina responded with this language, if I am a minor, then I'll be a Nazir because my father made the vow. And if I am an adult, and here we're understanding minor and an adult not being less than 13 or more than 13, but rather for the sake of vows, under 12 and more than 12. So if I'm a minor and I can't make vows, then fine. If I am an adult, more than 12, then I can make my own vows and I'll be a Nazir anyway. So let's read that line according to both opinions. We'll try. This line makes sense according to Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, who said that the cutoff line is 12 years old. That's why Rabbi Chanina says, if I'm a minor, meaning under 12, then I'll be a Nazir because my father made me a Nazir. And if I'm more than 12, then I'll be a Nazir because I'll make my own vow and you don't have to test me. That's good. But according to Rabbi, who says the cutoff line is 13 years old and has 2 hairs, so then when the child says, if I'm gadol, which means if I'm more than 12, then I'm under my own authority. Well, that's not true. Yes, at 12 he can make his own vows, but he's actually still also under his father's dominion. So he should not have made the 12 the cutoff point. According to the Biu, says 13 is the cutoff point. So the language in the story doesn't fit. Because you're right. According to the B, he would have to explain that the story wasn't that he used that exact language of Katan and Gadol, but rather he meant generally, if I have to be a Nazir because of my father's vow, whatever age that is, then I'll be it. And if it's because of my own vow, because I'm old enough to make my own vow and my father is not, which would be after 13, then I'll be a Nazir for myself. And so you don't have to bother checking whether I have 2 hairs or not, if I'm that 13 or not. If I do, then I'll be a Nazir myself. Okay. So that's how we can read the story according to both. Now, follow-up question, interesting, regarding this cutoff line, right? Because the Nazirut is a process, has a beginning, middle, and end that could be at least 30 days. So at what point exactly is it significant that the child be under that cutoff line? Mikara Kaim ben Nazirut Dile. Let's follow the B Yehuda Nasi, who says, let's say it's exactly on his 13th birthday, and he also has 2 hairs. So if he already had 2 hairs before the father made the vow, so the father made the vow after the kid's 13, then the result will be the Bichanina would be a Nazir because of his own vow. Because that's it. He already had 2 hairs before the father said anything. So that's a clear case. And if the father made the vow for his son, and the son didn't have hairs yet, and he went through the 30 days and completed the 30 days of a Nazirut, and only got hairs afterwards, then it's clear that the son would be obligated because of the father's obligation, because he was under the cutoff line the entire time. The question for us is, what if he gets the 2 hairs in the middle of the 30 days? So when the father made the vow, didn't have 12 hairs yet. So there are 2 hairs yet, therefore it should apply. But when the Nazirut is over, then the kid is a full adult. And so in that case, when the kid completes the Nazirut, were they obligated based on their own vow or the father's vow, right? Can the father make a vow even though the end of it will be after the cutoff point? And that's the question. Now, this question is easily answerable according to the Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it's the 12 is the cutoff point, that the father can no longer impose Nazirut, because if the father would impose Nazirut when the kid was under 12, meaning not yet competent, and then during that 30-day period would then become competent to make their own vows, that ability for a 12-year-old to make their own vows is only to the Banan in any case. So it would not override the father's the father's obligation, the vow that the father made, obliging the son. So that would continue no matter what. But according to the B, that cutoff point is much more significant, because if he was under 12, under 13, when it didn't have 2 sarot, when the father made it, and then by getting 2 hairs, now he's no longer under his father's jurisdiction, so that Nazirut does not continue, and so it never started, but it never concluded. Can't bring his korbanot for that. And regarding his own ability to make a vow, that was only after he's 13. And so that never started, because the one that started was his father's. And he said, either my father starts or my own starts. So he didn't begin, although he could have begun it because he's over 12, but he didn't, because it's the father's that started, but the father's then stopped, because that's it. Once he's an adult, the father's obligation can no longer continue. So what is that? That's the question. What would you do in such a case? He says, you're right. According to the B, this kid would be stuck, and he has no way of getting out of it until he sits as a Nazir for 60 days, so that he has a full term because of his father, because maybe, since it started under his father, maybe it continues even after he has 2 hairs, and he would have to bring for that. But maybe not. Maybe it stops because he got 2 hairs in the middle, and in that case he would be obligated to be a Nazir on his own account. But he didn't start. He can't count those days before he got the 2 hairs for his own. So he has to. Let's make the whole scenario. If his father made a vow that the son is going to be a Nazir 15 days before he grows 2 hairs. Great, he did 15 days, now he grows 2 hairs. So maybe that's okay, and he can continue under his father, so we'll have to do another 15 days for that. And then that will complete it. But maybe not. Maybe once he's a full adult, then the father's Nazirut does not apply, and then he said, I'm going to be either or. He told it to Gamliel. Then he would have to start his own. So then 15 days later, he has to start his own, and 60 days after the father first did, then he did 30 and 30. One way or another, he is a real obligated Nazir, and only then he can bring one set of korbanot to take care of whichever vow actually applied. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, amen v'amen.